As a business owner of an agriculture company, how can you implement the three pillars of sustainability? That's what we're going to be talking about in this conversation. Welcome, Lee. I'm so happy that you're here.
Delighted, Lourdes, as always. I'm always grateful to be able to spend some time with you.
Me too, me too. Lee Brower is one of the speakers in a blockbuster movie, The Secret. But apart from that, he was also a delegate at the 2017 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And apart from that, the most important thing is I know Lee personally, and that's why he's here today. Welcome again, Lee.
Wonderful to be here.
And if you're wondering what his credibility is, other than the ones that I already said, he's a family business coach that serves successful entrepreneurs who love their families and want to make a difference. At Empowered Wealth, the company that he founded, they empower and strengthen family and business leaders. The belief is that by strengthening family and business leaders, they will empower their family, team, neighborhood, and community, and consequently affect the cornerstones of society: education, health, spirituality, and economic and political stability. They do this through the powerful design process and through proprietary concepts and tools with personal, family, and business coaching and workshops. He's also a co-founder of the Transformational Leadership Council. Welcome again, Lee.
Well, thank you. Grateful to be here. Most important thing is I am a father and I have 19 grandkids, so and a wonderful wife. So I'm grateful for that.
Lots of experiences in there. So let's get this show started. So I wanted to ask you, how did you get so passionate about empowering families?
Well, I grew up in the estate planning business. So I had an office in Beverly Hills and we had some amazing clients, former president of the United States, a lot of entertainers, sports professionals. But working with families in estate planning, there's a statistic that really started to gnaw at me. And that was that this is a global statistic. They call it shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. 97% of family wealth never survives that third generation. Global statistic. And I like, wow, what an indictment on our industry if only 3% of the people that we serve are able to pass on that wealth beyond the second or third year. So I started really looking at wealth and what does wealth mean? And so I really kind of made a drastic move. I just stepped out of it and said, let's focus in on the things that matter more than money. We were doing a good job of preparing the money for future generations, but we were not doing a very good job preparing future generations for the money. And so that became the focus. And in that, I started coaching entrepreneurial families in the year 2000 and have been able to have the opportunity to coach hundreds of families from around the world who are highly successful business owners. And how do we bring principle-based leadership into the business and into the family? And I truly believe that, has there been a civilization ever that has failed that didn't lose the family first? And are we so arrogant to think that if we can neglect the family and businesses, that this won't happen to us in our global economy as it is right now? So yes, I am very focused in on how do we strengthen. If somebody calls me, they say, can you help me with my business? I say, maybe. Why don't you and your spouse come and spend, a couple of days with me and we'll decide. And they'll say, my spouse, what does he or she have to do with it? And I say, exactly. And so that's kind of my niche. And I think it's a good niche. I'm very passionate about it.
I'm so glad that you're doing what you're doing, because I remember from elementary in the Philippines, one of the first lessons I can always remember in social studies subject was family is the cornerstone of society, and I've never forgotten that. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing, which leads me to my second question. What are the three essential elements of leadership?
Thank you. It's probably going to surprise you what I'm going to say first, only because it's not so obvious. But having had the opportunity of working with families for, decades now, and having done some studies, I would say that if I could define in one word the pillar that would provide the greatest strength, it would be gratitude. And, when you have an abundant mindset of gratitude, and if you can pass that on into future generations, you leap over the risk, you leap over this pitfall of entitlement. And when you have that attitude of entitlement, then it closes off. And I have a saying that says the enemy of thriving is arriving. And so oftentimes, whether it's you have somebody that's born on third base and they actually believe they hit a triple, okay, you know what I mean? Or, you know, is that mindset of entitlement. And it may happen it happens all the time just because people, they're successful and then they retire and you lose all of that growth, you know, that wisdom that's there. So how do we capture that wisdom? So I would say number one is gratitude. Number two is to have an enduring vision. So an enduring vision means that I have a vision that transcends any destination. So oftentimes we talk about goals, and, you know, again, we get to the enemy of thriving is arriving. And so I made a decision in my life that I want no finish lines. I do not want any finish lines in my life. So if I have a vision that's endless, that's limitless, if I have a vision that's enduring, what can that vision be? It's something that has, yes, milestones that I'll fight for, milestones along the way, but I don't want a goal that stops me. You know what I mean? I've arrived. But if I can have milestones, that excites me. Stepping stones excite me. Stepping stones to get to the milestones that continue to pursue a horizon. See, I mean, where is the horizon? You know, and when you think about, Laura, where's the horizon? Can you, you know, it's out there. Can you get to it? No. I mean, can you sneak up on it? No. Can you, you know, I mean, you can, as you approach the horizon, it moves. And that's what you want in your vision. You want something that is enduring, that is constantly out there, that keeps you in motion, so that you leap over this concept of arriving. So that's number two, to have that sustainable vision that goes on. And I would say number three is to take responsibility. You know, I think leaders today need to take responsibility. And let me go back to vision and gratitude for just a second. Would you say, when you really think about it, that many leaders, I think, are afraid of the future? And if you don't have an abundant mindset, you don't have gratitude, and you don't have a strong, enduring vision, okay, then when you can't see that, you don't know what it is, and so you have a fear of the future. Where is that leader that said, let's put a man on the moon, let's bring him home? You know, and so that elevates, they want to elevate and lift it up. They take responsibility. It seems like we see too many people shoving off the responsibility and laying blame. The way that they elevate themselves, when you have leaders that are elevating themselves by pushing others down around them, we have a problem. That is not authentic leadership. And so authentic leadership is gratitude, have an enduring vision, take responsibility.
Great, really just great learnings. And I also love what you mentioned about sustainable vision, because I remember having learned too about how it's so different when you define leadership from the Far East and from the North American context. I remember somebody shared with me that Japan has 300-year plans, and
Yes.
talking about sustainability to its very authentic definition of it has to last forever. That's what sustainable means. And
Mhm.
so, and I also like what you mentioned about no finish lines, because it means that I'm just into the sustainability thing. So I was thinking about circular economy.
Uh-huh.
And so when we talk about this, and also at the same time, when you're talking about taking responsibility, I was just reading this morning from my 5-minute journal about, you know, there's a pause, a gap between, and I remember this clearly when you were talking about this in one of our sessions from Strategic Coach, is being able to respond, the etymology of responsibility, you know?
Versus reacting.
Yes.
And we have too many people. We call that, in our language, we call that red R versus green R. So red R is where we respond from this amygdala, which is the animal part of the brain, you know, and so it kept humans alive for years because they had that quick response to danger. And yet we're seeing so many people you accept the fact that their actions, their behavior is coming, when it comes from here, then we surrender our control to somebody else or something else. So if somebody cuts me off on the freeway and I boom, I just gave control to that person that cut me off the freeway. I've surrendered my control to that person. And we see it happen in politics. Somebody says something and boom, boom, it's right back. You know what I mean? Boom, boom. Where is that pause? Who has control of themselves that can pause, ask themselves a curious question? I wonder what's going on in that person's life that would cause him to drive that way. That must be very tough to live with that, and to kind of move into an empathetic kind of a way, and then move into curiosity. And then that's where solutions happen. Solutions can't happen from this part of your brain. Solutions can only happen from the prefrontal cortex, which sets us apart as human beings. Why do we have to act like animals when we could be thinking like human beings? And so that's what I call a red R response is boom, boom, and it's usually a negative response, versus a green R response is to pause, ask myself, what can I be grateful for in this moment, and move into curiosity. And you keep control when that happens.
Perfect, perfect. And I also learned from you, maybe you can share with our audience today the challenge mindset of what's working or not working for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm seeing now is if I could identify, again, another leader's responsibility, and that is, I see that if you have great managers, that you're working with, they're going to identify the things that aren't working and hopefully come up with solutions for that, because they're in it, they're on the ground floor, they're in the mix of it. And so they challenge what is not working. Your leaders in today's environment, if you're not challenging what is working, you're going to get left behind. With artificial intelligence coming in, that's going to be a great, 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 great help to allow us to become more human, to be able to focus on those human qualities and characteristics that we have, because we can free our time up. And I'm starting to see more and more evidence of it. You're going to have leaders that adapt to the changes by asking the right questions. If they can see questions, questions never asked are answers never given. And I think one of the great responsibilities of leaders is to challenge what is working and ask yourself, how can we make this even better? To see around the corner, to be able to look into the future and have the courage to move into the future, thinking about the solutions. They're the ones that are going to be part of the great leaders. You add that to the other three things that we talked about, and then that becomes another pillar, perhaps, maybe, is this ability to see into the future, to challenge the status quo, to challenge traditional thinking. If not, you're going to get left behind. You will get left behind.
I really like that, to challenge the status quo, because I think in today's world where technology and society is so fast paced, we sometimes forget the importance of, we just talked about the gap between, what's the circumstance and the reaction or the response to it. And so to be able to have the time to really pause and
not surrender your control. See, I mean, that's the motivator. That's what inspires you. I want, who likes to give up control of themselves? You know what I mean? But we do it all the time.
Yeah. So, which leads me to my next question. Maybe you can talk on the rationale in terms of the stewardship, because this was really big in terms of your practice on stewardship.
Yes, thank you. I mean, we have, this is the take responsibility. Okay, when you really think about it, we all have a steward. I look at the work that you're doing, okay, and it's because you feel that you are a steward of the oceans, right? I mean, isn't that the group that you're pulling together, and what you're bringing back is, if you don't take if somebody doesn't take responsibility, our oceans are going to be gone. I mean, they're not going to be useful. I mean, there's so many, when you really think about it, you got plastic and marine pollution. That's a concern. You've got overfishing. That's a concern. It's not under control. Acidification. I mean, it's constant. Global warming is playing a role as well. And then there's this thing called eutrophication. Did I say that right? Eutrophication. I didn't even know what it was. I had to go look it up. And this came from when I was doing the thing with the UN, but it's eutrophication. It's just all of the minerals and everything get washed in from the soil and everything that comes into the ocean. Somebody has to take responsibility. And so if I'm a steward, for me, first of all, I feel like I have a stewardship responsibility to me. Okay. Take care of this body, take care of myself, take care of this brain. That's a stewardship responsibility. If I don't take care of that, everything else doesn't matter. Then I have a stewardship responsibility to my family. Look, that's God has entrusted me to be with his family. And if I don't make them first, then I've got my priorities messed up. But there's certain principles that are the same on both sides. So if I'm a principle-based leader, not a values-based leader, I don't believe in values-based leading, okay? Because I think it's nonsense. If everybody on this call, if you ask them, do you believe that integrity is a cornerstone value in your life or in your business or in what you do? Everybody's going to say yes. But however many people are listening to this, that's how many different definitions we have of integrity. Unless we've had the same experiences, the same thoughts, the same, you'll never have the same definition of integrity. Because I'll define it completely different than you because of experiences that I've had. And so I believe in principles. Principles allow individuals that have different sets of values to be able to work together. If I have a principle the principle is always do what's in the best interest of this, or a principle is, make it simple. We always express gratitude. We can be grateful in our circumstances, or, we agree that we'll start each meeting. So that's a principle. We start each meeting with a grateful thought or something that we're grateful for to put us in that right spirit. And so identify as a company, if you'll take the time to look at your experiences that you've had in the past, identify what are those principles that you can always count on us to do. In other words, what can you count on me to always do? Do you see what I'm saying? And that will reveal a principle. And as you reveal those principles, you're not going to be perfect. Coach John Wooden, who was a great basketball coach, one of the best coaches ever, and was one of my mentors and a close friend, had a saying that said, I'm not what I ought to be. I'm not what I'm going to be. And I'm not what I ought to be. I'm not what I'm going to be. But thank goodness I'm not what I used to be. And so it's that kind of a thing. If we have principle based, yes, we'll step outside of it. But if we catch ourselves and we move back into it. So anyway, I see that as being an essential part of leadership and in surviving in today's world.
Wonderful. And you just brought me back to one of the teachings that I remember very well, which we actually cascaded to our organization when we start and finish our meeting. You call it Go Big. Big
Yes.
is an acronym for begin in gratitude. And after we finish, you go fit, finish in thanks. So we still actually do that to this very moment.
Go big and be fit. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So no, think about it this way. If you develop traditions people expect from you, whether it's traditions in your family or traditions in your business, they become glue. They really do become glue. So if you've developed a tradition of going big and somebody's driving to come to meet with you, or they're coming to a meeting, or they're going to get ready to jump on a Zoom call, and they know that the first thing you're going to do is ask them, would you be willing to share something that's going on positive in your life today? Or would you be, they start thinking about it before they ever get there. And so what's happening is you're preconditioning the mind. Can light and darkness occupy the same space at the same time? No, can't do it. But all we need is a spark of light to get rid of the darkness. See, the definition of darkness is an absence of light. So all you got to do is give a little bit of light. And so what happens when you do that, somebody comes in and they may be complaining about the guy that cut them off, or something may have happened at home. And so now you're asking them to be creative, go big first. That purges that negativity because you can't have light and darkness together at the same time. And now you put them in their very best self to be able to be creative in that moment.
Sounds great. And so I touch on leadership. I touch on stewardship. The next one I want to touch on is partnership. I probably should have touched on that first before stewardship, but there's no rush. I was talking about the power of pause. So maybe talk to us about, and I love the partnership that we had, even though, and I say that in the context of, I like what you were saying a while ago in terms of principle based versus values based, because I used to define, and obviously everybody will have a different definition of integrity. But for me, somebody cascaded this to me and I took it on that integrity is doing the right thing, even though no one's watching. And in the context of partnership that I wanted you to talk and touch on would be like, we were talking about sustainability, and like, even if I haven't seen you for the longest time, you know that it's just one message would be like, it'll bring back the partnership that you and Eric and I had from all those years that we were together in the strategic coach. So maybe you can touch on partnership.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about this great event that you have coming up, and here's the power that I foresee. Let me do it this way to you. What are the tallest trees in the world? I mean, are you for me? I mean, some people know what they are, some people they have different names, but what are the tallest trees in the world? Do you know?
I'm not very good, so I'm going to say bamboo.
Okay. Bamboo grows very fast, feeds a lot of people, but the tallest trees in the world are sequoia or redwood trees. In fact, they've been around. They have one tree that they've identified has been around for 1,500 years. They call it the tree, the General Sherman, over 300 feet tall. And so if you go to the redwood forest or the sequoia forest, which are in Northern California, it's almost spiritual. You walk in, these trees are so tall, they're like 200 to 300 feet tall. And it's like everything is happening up here. And so it's so quiet when you come in. And, you've seen the pictures where cars drive through the trees. That's a sequoia, big redwood. And so you think of this tree that's 200 to 300 feet tall, all of them, they're up in there. How deep do you think the taproot goes in order to sustain and hold up thousands of tons of tree into the air? Any idea?
I think it would be, obviously should be deep to be able to hold that.
Yeah. A lot of people think it's same distance as the tree is. It's got to be at least that far down or the wind's going to blow it over, right? The average length of the taproot on a redwood tree is somewhere around 8 feet.
Just
That's
that.
6 to 10 feet max, 6 to 10 feet down in the ground. Now, with it's only that deep. So you say, oh, well, their roots must go out for miles underneath the ground. Nope, they don't. You know how far they go? To the next tree.
Wow.
And then what happens is the roots, then I call it interdigitized, like this is interdigitization for me. Okay. So this is interdigitized. And so they interdigitize. That's my word. You won't find it in the dictionary, probably, but it's my word. They interdigitize with each other like this. And so, in fact, they've actually determined, this is really interesting, that they communicate with each other via fungus. So like if the tree that's on the outside part of the grove needs water, they will funnel water to that tree. It's amazing what they do. So if you're going to knock over a redwood tree, you got to knock over the whole forest. That's why they're so strong. That's why, and their bark is insect repellent. It's got insect repellent naturally in it. That's why, so it's the combination of everything. So imagine if you could form a partnership that would be like the redwood trees, where you have a common vision, you have common principles of how you're working. You know what I mean? You see a vision that's out there. You identify the principles that you're going to work by. And what you gave me as a definition of integrity was a principle. So you know what I mean? That was a principle. And that is that you act as if though nobody is watching. When you can act do the right thing in the right way, at the right time, when nobody's watching, that's a principle. And so you identify some of the values, your values, by the principles that you adhere to. What is it we can always count on you to do? To do the right thing in the right way at the right time when nobody's watching. So that becomes a principle. So to me, the intent is if you can find the right trees with the right principles, with the right vision, that truly want to make these oceans an asset for so many reasons, okay, and come together like this and interdigitize, then you've got the strength to really get something done. And things happen with numbers. The rugged individualist that's going to go out and change, save the world, they get blown over, you know. But when you come together as a team like this, that's where you get your real strength. So I'm hoping that you find some redwood trees that come together at this new conference, this conference that you have coming up in September, right? That you have some trees that can kind of come in there and put the roots together and then flourish, but really lock arms, interdigitize.
I love that word too, interdigitize. It's so innovative and maverick.
Well, you don't want to disinterdigitize. You want to interdigitize. So,
but I also kind of being self-reflective when you were talking about, you brought that word again that I'm so familiar from you, rugged individualist. And we've now come to a point where it's fascinating because we started when I introduced you that you were one of the delegates in the United Nations conference. And I almost always forgot how number 17 is actually partnership for the goals. And so in combination with what you already talked about, it was this redwood tree example brings to mind in my head and in our practice we're in. Sometimes it doesn't take deep enough or far enough to be able to make that impact.
Yeah.
Little things count. Small things count.
Very much so. Very much so. Yes. I think they count more than the big things. They're what's sustainable.
Yeah.
Okay? That's what makes things enduring. And, I've kind of jumped on the word enduring lately because I think it carries with it a sense of love and a sense of permanence. You know what I mean? So for me, and sustainable is a word that's getting used in a number of different ways and has different meanings. And so I just have really jumped on the concept of endurable wealth, and so what are those things that we want to endure and be there for our future generations? And so
I love it. So my last question to you is, I love your Meaningful Monday videos because you've been doing this now for a decade. I remember when you made a commitment in one of our meetings that you were going to do this every Monday and you had your very first video. I was one of your mentees in Strategic Coach. How was that journey for you now a decade later?
Yeah, no, it's actually amazing, isn't it? That first of all, I'm impressed. I have to say that I haven't missed a Monday. For me to do something like that every Monday is out of character. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, wow, but taking the time each week, and my staff says, can't you do like 4 or 5 in a row? I said, I can't. You know what I mean? I'm not wired that way, and I want it to be sincere, and I want it to be what's on top of mind in the moment. And because I'm doing it for me, as unfortunately, that's a little bit selfish, but it's as a result of it's forced me to take several hours a week to just be reflective. And I think that our past is our greatest teacher. And if I can reflect, let me just ask you this: is there anything in your life? I'll talk to the listeners of this. Is there anything in your life that you can't learn from? Anything that's ever happened sooner or later that you can't learn from. And sidebar, I was sitting next to a lady on an airplane and she was grieving her problems to me. And I finally asked her the question. I said, well, let me just ask you a simple question. Is there anything in your life that you can't learn from sooner or later? And she said, oh, yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. She said, yeah, my first husband. And I said, okay. All right, well, okay. And she said, yeah, and she went off and I went, calm her down again a little bit. And so I said, well, you've got a ring on. Have you remarried? She says, oh, yes. I said, well, how's that going for you? She says, great. She says, I learned from my first one that. I said, wait a second, what did you just say? And she caught herself and she was like, oh, I did. I guess I did, And so if there's nothing that we can't learn from, then that means that we can learn from everything. And that sounds like the perfect school, albeit with imperfect students. It sounds like somebody, something, some power, something created this wonderful school that we can learn from. And so if we can learn from everything, if we get reflective and we take time, won't our wisdom grow? If we can capture the experiences that we've had in our lives, and what I've done is I've taken another step. If I have an experience that's really taught me something, I will name it. So I can stick a stake in the ground, and then I'll tell somebody about it, but I'll tell them the name first so that they'll remember it. And just a very simple, quick story that happened just recently. I was working with a group of YPO presidents, and I asked them, take a second and share with me an experience. It was Go Big. We were going big with them at the beginning. Share an experience where you felt particularly proud about either your family or business in the last 6 months or so. And one guy right off the bat, young man, says, oh man, just 3 weeks ago, I was out with I have 4 little kids, and they'd never been on a hike. And so I decided to take them on a hike, and we went out, kind of camped. And the hike was obviously too aggressive because it was steep and we had to climb over boulders, and the kids are helping each other over the boulders. And we finally got to the top, and then it started raining, and we're coming down this thing, and it's, but kids were hanging on to each other's hand, and they're coming down. And he said, I got down to the bottom, the sun came out, and I looked over there, and I looked at my wife with the 4 little kids walking behind her, and they look like a duck, like a mama duckling with their little ducklings behind them. And he's choking up as he's talking to me. You know what I mean? And I'm like, whoa. And I said, all right, close your eyes. So he closed his eyes, says, what do you see? When you're standing there, you're looking at your wife, and what do you see around you? And he paused for a long time. He says, yellow flowers. There were a lot of yellow flowers. All right, you just had a yellow flower moment. Now, if you will name that yellow flower moment, you're going to have future yellow flower moments that have nothing to do with a hike, have nothing to do with rain, have nothing to do with yellow flowers. But you're going to be able to say to your children, is this a yellow flower moment? And that's going to signify someplace where we had to get together. We had the grit. We helped each other. We got through a tough time, and the sun came out shining when we were done. Yes, we're right in the middle of a yellow flower moment. That's an asset now to that family. And it's almost like, would you rather give him $1 million, or would you rather give him that asset that's going to survive? I'll bet you that by capturing it and naming it, I'll bet you that someday he'll see his killed children talking to their children about yellow flower moments. So that's something that just happened recently that gives you a good example of what we were just talking about.
Perfect segue before we end, because you reminded me, it's fascinating that you call this yellow moment flower, because I know when Eric and I had our one-on-one time with you, this was one of the things that we did of the stories, and one of his stories was the yellow buffalo moment. And I don't know if you remember, but it was that time when the yellow buffalo was the rescue helicopter.
That's right. No, I do remember. Now you bring it up. Yes. Isn't that funny? I mean, see, you name something, it gives it a handle that you can hand off to other people, and it carries the lesson with it. Is this a yellow buffalo moment? Yes, thank goodness it is. So it's that's pretty cool. That's fun that you brought that up. It's been a while, so I mean,
It's been a while.
It travels,
Yes. Thank you again so much, Lee. My biggest takeaways, lots of takeaways from our conversation today, was 3 things. When you mentioned about what did you say? How did you say it? Every thriving, you end thriving when you arrive. Kind of sounded like that.
The enemy of thriving is arriving.
The enemy of thriving
is arriving.
The enemy of thriving is arriving. I really love that, because there's no finish line. It's like we continue the legacy when we were talking about stewardship. My second takeaway was obviously when you were talking about questions never asked is answers not given. That is such a profound statement for me. And obviously the last but not the least is what we were just talking about, the power of naming. It brought me back to that again. I have to revisit that with Eric again. So
good.
Thank you so much again. How can our listeners get in touch with you?
Well, the easy way is to go to leebrower.com. And that's probably the easiest way. You can go to empoweredwealth.com. A lot of people think I'm a financial advisor because of the word empowered wealth, but empowered wealth, or what are those assets that you value more than money? And so how do you bring all those together to build that true wealth, or that enduring wealth? So either Lee at leebrower.com is my email, leebrower.com is the website, or empoweredwealth.com.
I forgot to mention too, if you guys wanted to have a great read, Lee actually has a book called The Brower Quadrant, and you'd love it. I love the concepts that he shared in that book. So go ahead.
And I've just been approached by a major publisher, said, would you be willing to issue a renewed edition of it? So we're in the process of going through and bringing it current. And we have another book behind it called Arrows Out. And Arrows Out just means, instead of thinking always about yourself, the Arrows Out mindset is where we think of others first before ourselves. It's that ultimate highest level of gratitude.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you again so much, Lee. So I hope you can share with us your biggest takeaways from this conversation. I got lots of nuggets. I got lots of notes. Just so you know, I was writing here on my red slide. Thank you again so much, Lee.
No, it was my pleasure. And I had a strong feeling about, as we were going through this, that I hadn't had before, about what you're doing and what you get to do with the wonderful people that you're surrounding yourself with, and they're bringing their wisdom together. So I'm excited about that.
Thank you so much.